Hello, it's Michael Pilarski, and I'm here today to tell you more about my fairy library. And today we're going to review the top 10 books on the Sidhe, which is another race of fairy beings that most people don't know about. And I didn't know about it till quite some time back myself. So here, who are the Sidhe anyway? And it's spelled, by the way, in Gaelic Sidhe, but pronounced she. We've all heard of the banshee in Gaelic Celtic legends. So the Sidhe are a race of beings related to humans that we once shared the earth with. And probably the best way to explain who they are is to look at the elves in the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's trilogy. When he did that research for that book, he was researching into the Sidhe and these Celtic legends, and he brought the Sidhe as forth as these elves in the story, and so they're tall, magical beings that have great power. And we learned that in Lord of the Rings. And that is a very close description to who the Sidhe are, the elves of Tolkien. Now, what happened at the end of the Lord of the Rings, or in the trilogy, the elves said, hey, we're out of here. We're tired of all this, this fighting and this strife on Earth. And so we're leaving. We're sailing away to past the setting sun where you won't find us. And so in a sense, you could say that is, according to the history, the lore, is that the Sidhe beings and the humans, even though they shared the earth for a period of time and lived in harmony, they ended up going to war. There was a lot of fighting, and the Sidhe basically said, we're out of here, and they retreated to another dimension of the earth. They are part of the earth. We could say that they live. Their realm is inside the earth, and they live at a different frequency. They're not like human figures with our, they are a flesh and blood being, but they're not quite the same. They're different than humans, but they're related. You could call them our long lost relatives. And so they've been living there all these years, and the Gaelic and Celtic traditional stories about the Sidhe and these beings are a result of the interaction that kept happening at sporadic times. It isn't like we've been totally cut off from them. They actually come to the human realms, and some humans actually go to their realms, and that's all. You find all those kinds of stories in the fairy legends of the Celts. And of course, England and UK, that's where a lot of this information comes from. So, but in recent times, the information and the knowledge about these people has been less and less and less as the fairy lore has been listened to less and less in England, etc. But in recent times, there's been a rapprochement happening of sorts. And so this pile of books on the Sidhe is what's coming out in modern times. So the best book to really get a sense of this is to read John Matthews' book on the Sidhe. The subtitle is Wisdom from the Celtic Other World. And the story with this is that John was contacted by an archaeologist who had just discovered a new stone chamber in Ireland, and it was like a new discovery. And John was one of the first people to go in there into this stone-lined chamber in the earth. And when he was there, he said, wow, this is really spooky or eerie or powerful. There's it's really, there's energy here. So he left, went home, and shortly thereafter, he was contacted by a spirit being who said, hello, you visited us recently. You came to our place, and we decided we want to have some more connection and contact with you, so here we are to talk to you. And so over a period of months' time, John communicated with this Sidhe being who talked about the Sidhe race and brought it to our attention. So this is sort of like, what you might say, one of the seminal books in the modern times. Another person who then started communicating with the Sidhe was a man named David Spangler. David Spangler is one of the key figures in fairy lore in our current times. He's written something like 50 books. Great person, David Spangler, and I hold him in high regard. He's come to 5 of our fairy congresses and given a lot of talks. So I've got to actually hang out with David and sit at his feet and listen to him. And at one point, and he worked with a lot of nature beings and the Davic beings, but at one point he was contacted by a she, feminine being named Mariel, who came and started talking to him about the she and who they were and what they wanted, and again, to have an exchange with humanity. They wanted to, you might say, we would say bury the hatchet in the old days, or to make up, and they wanted to start having better relations with humans. So that's his first book. And then later on he came out with Engaging with the She, which is further information from the continuing correspondence with the she beings. And then he worked together with the she and with an artist named Jeremy Berg to put out a she oracle deck. So this is a way for humans to be able to, in a sense, learn from or interface with the she realms, because you can draw the card, you can see what it's saying to you, and you might say it helps set you up for communication. And so in the deck here, of course, are a set of cards, and this is the main figure they're using as the drawing on the front of the cards. And then each of the cards in the back, of course, will have a different figure. Here's the great glyph of the she, for instance. This is a magical, you might say, a magical password to get into their realm. It's you can use that symbol. Any rate, there's a whole series of cards here. A fair amount of them have stone symbology. So you can look at the cards, and then, of course, you get with the set a book that says what the different cards mean, just like any oracle deck. And so, here's you might say, a way of connecting into their realm. Another person who is contacted by the she in more recent times is Jaap van Etten. And Jaap is, I've been reading a number of his books. He's widely published. He lives in Sedona, Arizona, and he writes about what he calls metaphysical ecology. What are the other beings that we share the earth with that are in these fairy realms, and how do they relate to each other and to us? What is the ecology of the metaphysical realms? I'm an ecologist, so I really like the idea of metaphysical ecology. So Jaap van Etten talks about quite a few different kinds of beings in here, but mainly who are the she. He's in communication with them. They're downloading information. So here's another story from them. And a fascinating book, Rihanna Naard's Awakening, Life Lessons from the She. So I know Rihanna, and she's spoken at our fairy congresses. And Rihanna was contacted at one point, sort of out of the blue. And we all know that sometimes we have, like, someone finds out that they had a brother or a sister that they never knew about and never met, but later in life they were connected up. So interesting, a she guy contacted her and said, "I'm your she husband." Now Rihanna's married, has children. She's just a regular, you might say, earthling human. And she's contacted by somebody who says, "Hey, I'm your she husband, and we've lived together on the she realm for many times, and I just wanted to, connect up with you in your human incarnation." So here's, in a sense, you might say, cross reincarnations going on with the she realm. So Rihanna has to sort of sort out what it's like to have a human husband and also a she husband. And that's what this book is about. And there's a lot of information from her she. Niall is the name of the she husband, and we get a lot of information from Niall about the she realms and what they're like. This book is called Gnomes in the Garden, Celtic Fairy Teachings. And the term is actually quite misleading because this book introduces gnomes as one of many types of beings. And here he introduces, David and Carol Swing here introduces to dragons and trolls and she beings and nature spirits, all kinds of beings. Again, a metaphysical ecology kind of going on, and what the merfolk, centaurs, just a lot of different beings here. But the thing that's interesting is that I'd say that the main beings in the book that they're relating to are she beings. This is one of the only books I know that talk about the she and fairy nature spirits in the same book. Most books on fairies are about nature spirits or about the she only with the name fairy, but they use different names. But this book actually talks about the relationship of nature spirits and she and how they relate. So, and also how the trolls relate to the she, etc., etc. So there's you might say it's again, that word metaphysical ecology comes to mind that Yop uses. So this is quite these beings come and visit David and Carol and they hang out with them. So this book gives you insights into a lot of different kinds of beings. And it reads almost more like a novel than like a scientific work, you might say. And this is a book by R.J. Stewart, or Robert J. Stewart, The Living World of Fairy. Now, Robert's got about 50 books out. He's one of our most prolific authors in the fairy realm. He is one of the leading experts on Celtic fairy magic alive in the world today. He does a lot of teaching. You can actually take online classes from him. And R.J. Stewart came to our very first Fairy Congress in 2001. And he took us to meet the king and queen of the fairies. So we all trooped off, you might say, into the earth and met the king and queen of the fairies, gave them gifts, got some things in return, had conversations. And it was really very powerful what he led us to. And then he's been coming to the congresses many years since then. And so I've got to spend a lot of time learning from RJ. And when I first was introduced to the fairy beings through RJ, I just assumed they were the nature spirits. But I found out later, it took years and years to sink in, but all of a sudden I had this realization that RJ was talking about the she and not my cute little nature spirits and devas. And so RJ's work is a really deep look into the world of the she and how humans can relate to them. And you can read quite a few of his books. The Well of Light is another, there's so many of them. But the Living World of Fairy, of course, is one of the ones you can start with. But do take a look at R.J. Stewart's work. And finally, I want to put out this book here. This is by Anastasia Nutt. And Anastasia is R.J.'s partner. They're married. And and this book is called Unseen Worlds and Practical Aspects of Spiritual Discernment. And I'd like to always preface or bring books like this to your awareness, because if you're going to go off to these fairy realms and start relating to all these beings that live in these other realms at different vibrations, some of them are more closer at hand than others, because the plant nature spirits are like as close as the plants are to you. But the she are, you might say, at a more of a distance, at this other frequency down in the earth. But if you're going to be working with spiritual realms and working with spiritual beings of any kind, it's really nice to know the ins and outs, to know the safety protocols, to know what to do and what not to do, how to stay out of trouble. And so this book will help you stay out of trouble, you might say. You want to go to these realms, just like if you were going to, you might say, a part of the earth or a different culture that you weren't aware of. You really should do some homework and know the do's and don'ts of that culture you're going to so you don't get in trouble. Where are the bad spots in the neighborhood, etc. So this book will really help you find your way around the spiritual realms in a safe manner. So I highly recommend, not that I've ever had troubles myself, but I really recommend that you really do some homework and read books like this. There's some other ones I'll mention at another time, but this is a great one, Anastasia Nutt, friend of RJ. Now, this is interesting to me when I put this list of books together, and I wanted to mention our Fairy and Human Relations Congress. Almost every single one of these people has presented at the Fairy and Human Relations Congress. Anastasia presents there. RJ's presented there 13 years. David and Carol Swing are joining us on the Global Fairy Congress Online Congress this year. Rihanna Ard has presented at the Congress 3 or 4 times. Jaap van Etten is presenting for the first time on our Global Online Congress. David Spangler has been to the Congress 5 times teaching. And John Matthews has never been there, but his wife Catlin Matthews has, who carries on a lot of his work, works with him all the time. So the information on the she beings is really a strong component of our Fairy and Human Relations Congress, as well as the nature spirits and the Devic beings and other denizens of the fairy realm. So if you're interested in this sort of thing, you're all invited to come to the Fairy and Human Relations Global Online Congress, January 15th to 17th. There's a URL, a link in this description of this video below, so you can check out our Fairy Congress if you haven't heard of it. And we will hopefully be having our physical, all of us physical humans getting together again this next year. We couldn't have it last year because of COVID, but next year we hope to be having a in-person Fairy Congress again, so perhaps you might show up there. So remember, magic can happen in the twinkling of an eye, and it's much more fun to be alive in a world full of magic and fairy beings than just this dull, humdrum, muggle existence. So see you in the fairy realms, perhaps.